Welcome, Dr. Austin Lake. I'm so excited to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. You're a women's
Yeah.
health expert, and we have a lot of people listening who are going to benefit from our conversation today. So, welcome to the podcast. I would love for you to just start out with your story. If people, I'm sure a lot of my following already follow you as well. I've been following you for a long time. I love your content.
Thanks.
Your story and how you got so interested in women's health.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate those kind words. And I just always like to preface with I really don't view myself as an expert in anything. And I think this just gets back to kind of like you know, uh terminology. But for me, an expert is somebody who's dedicated their life into one particular topic or like a topic within a topic. And so I like to consider myself as somebody that's spent a lot of time in women's health, but it's all relative, right? And so I appreciate those words. But really, all I try to do for my clients and for my followers online is just try to share what I found to be helpful and actually effective. And so, having a niche that is focused on women's health has allowed me to kind of dive deep into the topic of how to help women thrive. And really, the story kind of gets back to the why behind all this gets back to a lot of my own personal story, and also just seeing, a lot of clients and patients in the past that were primarily women that were dealing with a lot of these issues that if it seemed that nobody was really helping them solve, and it just kind of was getting a lot of band-aids on them. And the downstream effect of that, at least from what I saw personally and in my practice, was just that the whole family was impacted, right? Like when mom doesn't feel well, nobody feels well. And that's, at least that's been my experience. And working with a few thousand women, and also my personal story with my own mom, is just seeing like how much of a impact that has on the family. And so really what my goal is to help the family succeed. And we do that through the helping the mother or the wife. And so as a functional medicine provider, my training is not in pharmaceuticals or surgery. I'm not a physician. So like I always want to point that out to people that, I have a doctorate degree, but my doctorate was actually in physical therapy, which, a lot of people are like, how did you even get to this point of doing women's health? And it's kind of a weird story, but, I started off just with that doctorate and had my own practice, and it was very holistic to start with, but it was very much holistic in like manual therapy and like, how can we get people out of pain and help them promote more muscular development and just better overall health. And it started to then turn into this more extensive, intervention, because I got trained in functional medicine like shortly after getting my degree. And that's where I really felt like I was able to kind of put all the pieces together, like how this human body works, at least, again, not from an expert level, but just from like a more practical level of like how to help people feel better. And that's where the functional medicine thing came in. And that was an additional 3 years on top of, the 7 or 8 years already spent. And so that's kind of how I got to this point where I am. But the nice thing about that is like, it's really allowed me to, it's kind of forced me to not rely on medications, and it's forced me to just like have to figure it out. And I'm very thankful for that, because I think when you start running into these difficult problems, as you're familiar with it, like people just want an out, right? Like they want to feel better. They want to like just kind of get over it, get back to living their life. And as a provider, as a practitioner, we want to help them do that, right? Like we want to get them feeling better. Like we want them to say like, yes, like things have changed. Like I noticed improvement. And so it's been very nice in a sense, because it's forced me to like figure out what's going on from a metabolic perspective, from the hormonal perspective, which is really what it always gets back to, is all these hormones that we're dealing with are all just messenger molecules communicating to the body from the external environment, like what's happening, and trying to elicit a change, right? So we can actually have ongoing homeostasis to where we can maintain what our body needs to maintain for survival and for thriving, if we can kind of get to that point. So that's kind of the background, and that's kind of how I got where I am.
Yeah, I very much respect your story and how you got here, because you're so right with the mother and the women in the family are the nurturers, are taking care of everybody. And like I've seen this in my own life with having
Mm,
3 children within 5 years and breastfeeding all of them, like things started to tank really
yeah.
quickly after that. And I developed insulin resistance. I'm like, what is this? I'm a dietitian with insulin resistance. How did this
Yeah.
happen? Following the conventional approaches. And then like my parents died, you're kind of in that sandwich generation too. And then my adrenals were just, I mean, I went through all this adrenal fatigue and adrenal exhaustion, and yes. And then like, I'm probably embarrassed to say this, I don't even really have a conventional doctor because
Oh yeah.
I would rather
People don't.
go to a functional, somebody who's working on the foundational approaches.
Yeah.
But a lot of women are going to conventional doctors and being gaslit and being told, well, your labs look fine.
Right.
This is just part of aging and blah, blah, blah. We know all of the problems with that. But I'd love to kind of start and just kind of walk through, the women in their fertile years versus moving into perimenopause and menopause. And I'm 49, like I'm in perimenopause. I haven't, any time that transition is coming for
Sure.
me. I know that's for sure. But let's talk about, because we don't talk a whole lot about women who are still fertile on this podcast. And one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to your content is you're a very strong Christian and a Christian-based practitioner. And you don't see a whole lot of people in the medical space and having that strong Christian foundation as well. So I think the issue, I don't want to say issue, but the topic of birth control can get a little hairy, especially those Christian followers, because like, well, I want to plan my family, but I want to have, protect my fertility, and I want to be able to plan for that accordingly. But what is happening? Let's first start with like what's happening to young women's fertility and why is it declining so vastly? And then we can move into like birth control options because having a daughter who's 22 years old, she's not ready to start a family yet, but
Sure.
she doesn't want to go on, she doesn't want to put synthetic hormones in her body either. So
Right.
let's start with like why fertility is on such a vast decline. It's a big
question. I mean, I think it's such a good question. I think the first thing to acknowledge is I think a good way of looking at this is asking the question of like, well, what does good hormonal health look like? And if you can kind of paint that picture of what good health looks like, you start to see that when the body's in a state of it's no longer in a state of survival, it's allowed to be in a state of thriving. Babies are a good idea, right? Like when your body is taken care of and it's not in a state of fight or flight or calorie deficiency or nutrient deficiencies or calorie deficit or overtraining or just marital stress, not sleeping, your body is going to have more of an ability to make life, right? But when your own life is at risk, again, from a biological, logical standpoint, it makes sense that your body wouldn't want to promote the survival of something else unless it's feeling like it's protected. So I think that's how I always want people to start with this conversation. Just like picture what it looks like to be in a good, optimal hormonal state, healthy state. And what does it look like then? Like, what does the opposite of that look like? And oftentimes you're going to see like all those things I just said, like you're not sleeping, you're eating an inflammatory diet, you're deficient in nutrients. You're maybe consuming alcohol here and there. And a lot of like younger people, I think, Gen Z are kind of coming out of this state that I think my generation was a lot of like really played a big role in of, like a nightcap every like most nights of the week, like you're kind of just constantly like a little bit of wine here, a little alcohol here, not a huge deal, or like microwave dinners, or, just eating a lot of convenience foods, just, or even like, we use a lot of fragrances in the home, or we have a lot of these cleaners in our households, or we're around a lot of these products that are endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so there's just a lot of things coming against hormonal health. There's a lot of things coming against the survivability of our not just like our next generation, but our current generation. Like the people that are currently alive are not living as long and as actively and as fruitfully as they were before. And so it's not even that we can't replace, which we are having a hard time replacing our current population, but our population that is currently actively existing now is having a hard time. And so it just makes a lot of sense that you're not going to see the likelihood of having a lot of, babies being born from this generation. So it has to start with like all these practical things. like before you start to get into IVF and all these different kind of things like that, it's like you really just start to have to look at your own life and analyze it from a very practical perspective. Like people just need to like not make it too complicated. Like again, whenever it feels confusing or super difficult or challenging, like we have to make it very simple and practical and get back to the basics and start to address the low-hanging fruit first before you ever get down the road of like what kind of medication do I need or what kind of surgery do I need or things like that. Like that's where I think we've gone wrong as a society. And it makes a lot of sense when you start to see it from a financial perspective. Because a lot of people make a lot of, not a lot of people, but some people make a lot of money off of people not feeling well. And instead of like getting rewarded for making them feel better, in my opinion, our conventional medical system gets rewarded for helping them not feel better. And that to me is just like the biggest travesty ever.
Yes.
So, yeah. So when it comes to birth control, then, it's like, look, like you're going to have problems with taking birth control long term, especially if it's a oral birth control, like B vitamins, like B6, B12, folate are one of the big ones that get depleted, B6 primarily. And those are very critical for this process known as methylation. Methylation is like your body's natural detoxification process where it's constantly repairing DNA, it's creating energy, it's helping you to detox. We're methylating like 300 billion times a second or something. Like it's like crazy amount. Like it's constantly happening. So if you don't methylate, you die. But B6 or oral birth control like depletes these things. It also depletes vitamin C, vitamin E. I wrote down a couple other ones here: magnesium, selenium, zinc, CoQ10. All those are so critical for mitochondrial health function, immune system protection, thyroid function, energy production. Like so basically what it means is like if you're constantly taking these things, you're depleting these resources that your body needs to thrive. And honestly, what happens to a lot of the clients I work with is they take it when they're younger. Maybe they take it to prevent a pregnancy. Maybe they take it because they're having some hormonal issues. They're trying to regulate their cycle or whatever, which is, in my opinion, the dumbest thing ever. But I get why people are doing it because they're being told that it's a good idea. But practically speaking, it's a bad idea. So when you're doing all this stuff, next thing you know, your mitochondria, which are the energy factories of your cell, most people are familiar with the term mitochondria, they're helping you produce energy. And when you're starting to deplete these things over time, in your 20s, it's not a huge deal. Like you have enough left over, you can kind of overcome it. But when you start getting in your 30s, and maybe you had a stint of birth control for a couple of years, maybe 5 years, and you never actually fixed or addressed these problems that came from being on birth control, now you start getting older and it's like, well, I guess I'm having these issues because I'm getting older. In my experience, it's because you've been spending more time in a state of deficiency. And that's what age really is. Like there are, I mean, you know this very well, but like there are about 4 phases of metabolic changes in our lifetime, right? And so, that happens when you're younger, like when you're born, adolescence, and then when you're like maybe in your 40s, and then when you're in your 60s. But beyond that, there's not a lot of like, we can't blame our metabolism on getting older. Usually it's like we can, we're doing that, but we're just be thinking about how long have I been dealing with deficiencies, or how long have I been dealing with poor detoxification, or how long have I had this mold exposure, or this issue with Lyme's, or this issues of parasites, or whatever. Like that's what people have been dealing with. And that's where I think age really plays a role in this stuff. But yeah, that's one thing to think about with birth control. And I think as far as how you can get around planning that so you don't have to use it is, understand your cycle. Like if you know where your cycle's at and you know that, hey, I'm ovulating between these days of the month consistently, I've been tracking it and I've seen this, I can't get pregnant unless I'm ovulating. And so a lot of times what happens is if you look at, this is a little bit more fringe, but, with people who are, maybe having intercourse before, like 3 or 4 days before they're ovulating, or at least peak ovulation, like, sperm can sit in there for a while and it can just wait to fertilize the egg. And so as soon as that ovulation window opens up, like you can get pregnant from that. So like there can be like a time period here, like a bit of a delay. And that's usually, at least in my experience, when girls are more likely to be conceived versus boys, because girl sperm are a little bit more resilient. They can last a bit longer. Boy sperm are a little bit faster and they die a little bit quicker. And so, if you hit right ovulation, you're more likely to have a boy. At least in my experience, it's been 100% accurate. People I've talked to, it's been the same way. But if you're not aware of this leading up to your, when conception could happen, you just have to know like what's going on and like how it could happen. And then if you know that, you have a window of time. It's like, hey, I can about a weekend before my ovulation, I should probably wear protection. I should probably be extra careful. I should be very mindful of this. Natural family planning is what my wife and I was always done. Unfortunately, she was on NuvaRing for probably the first year of our marriage. And then we kind of learned a little bit more about it and got her off it. And then we haven't been on birth control ever since. And so we've done natural family planning. We have 4 kids, and each one has been, it's worked out as far as like when we were trying to conceive and all that. And I know everyone has different stories and things can happen and all that. And at the end of the day, I think children are a huge blessing, and they're obviously a lot of work, but I think there's worse things in life than having a kid. Like, I really do. I think if that's a big mistake for you, again, obviously everyone has different situations. I might take some flack for that, but I still think children are great, and they're always a blessing no matter what. But you can still be careful and mindful about how to plan around that. And I think you just have to be a little extra cautious, but the reward is totally worth it. Like, not messing up your hormones by being patient and paying attention, I think is totally doable, and it's worth it, obviously. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but does that make sense?
No, that's very helpful. And social media is interesting because, young kids are on it. I know very few people or younger adults who don't use social media.
Yeah.
But, it can be a beast, but can be a huge blessing as well. And you talked about like how Gen Z is kind of coming out of the whole like binge drinking alcohol, looking at alcohol as something to pacify us and our entertainment. And, women my age who used to have a drink every night to, to calm themselves down. Like, I haven't drank in almost 3 years. And we talked before we started recording, like, I live in Wisconsin, in the mecca of beer drinking.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's very socially acceptable here. In fact, it's like less socially acceptable to be a non-drinker. But social media is interesting because like even my kids like will send me videos of, especially my daughter, of things that she's learning in the health realm. And she just got married, and so now she's looking at birth control and her options and family planning and all of that. And when I was her age, I knew nothing about my cycle. Even though I was, studying in the health field, I knew nothing about my cycle. I was on birth control, like I was on the pill after I got married for a couple of years. I have no idea. Nobody told me anything about any kind of side effects. It took me 8 months to get pregnant with our daughter after off of that. And I was very healthy, eating well, exercising. And then my sons were like, boom, boom. I was pregnant. Like, we thought it would take a while for our second child. And so I went, we started to try, and it was like, bam.
Yeah.
Because I was coming out of basically menopause from the pill, but people don't know. Like, my daughter knows about her cycle, and for her birthday this year, I got her a smart ring, and she hook it into the natural family planning. So she is very aware of her temperature changes and all of these things. And so we have that at our disposal now, which is really a blessing. But you still, like, you feel like sometimes you go into the conventional system and they're like in the dark stone ages still, and they're like, so how do we work around? And I think this is getting better. I don't know, maybe I don't go
know either.
Very often or ever. But like, how do you work around that if so let's step back. Very important conversation that you mentioned. If you're having fertility issues, you need to take a look at, can your body support a child at this point, and what can I do, take control of to make my fertility, make it so that my body can have a baby. But say, you go beyond that, and it's so frustrating because you go in the conventional system, and what do they push on you? They push hormones and fertility treatments, and they don't ask about your lifestyle. And so what would you suggest if somebody did, they're going into their conventional doctor and they're not getting answers? Is there like a better way to move around this and, support it more naturally?
Yeah, I'm absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing is if, again, I always try to get as practical as possible before we get super esoteric. And so I think people want to jump to what kind of lab tests can I do, like what kind of procedures can I have, or like we get so caught in the weeds on just like all these interventions that are oftentimes very expensive and very, timely. And so I would way rather you meet with somebody who can ask you questions of like, okay, let's walk through your day. Like, what does it look like? Like, what challenges do you face? Like, what symptoms are you having? Like, what is your digestion like? Like, are you having constipation? Are you having headaches? Are you having acid reflux? Are you having bloating? Are you having low energy at certain times of the day? How's your sleep? Like, are you taking supplements? Are you even taking a B complex or vitamin D? Or are you eating enough fat and protein? Like, are you relying on quick, simple carbohydrates? Or are you eating a well-balanced macronutrient diet? Like, are you eating a low inflammatory diet? Like, if you're not getting asked those questions, like you're really just spinning your wheels and wasting time. Like, part of what we do in my program is we ask all those questions. Like, we work with each person right off the bat individually and figure out all those things.
Yeah.
And once we've done that, I like doing that first before I even look at anyone's labs. Like, I would rather know, like, what does your day look like? Because if I know what challenges you're up against, then I can, when I'm looking at people's labs, it's like, oh, like you mentioned that you have low energy and you have some acid reflux. I'm going to go look immediately for MCV, which is mean corpuscular volume, and see if it's above 90. Because if it is, you're likely having a red blood cell that's too big, which means that you're probably a little bit lower in B12, which probably means that you have low intrinsic factor, which probably means that you're having insufficient stomach acidity. So
Yep.
like, okay, what do we do with that? Okay, we can fix that. Like, there are things there's a protocol for that. There's also eating hygiene principles that you need to be working on. Like, that gets back to your day. Like, what does your day look like? Are you eating most of your calories before 2 o'clock? Or are you eating mostly convenience foods in the evening time? And because you're too busy, or your kids are playing a bunch of sports and like you didn't plan ahead with your meals. And so you're just grabbing and going, and you're treating your house like a hotel. And I think if you do all that stuff, like, it becomes very obvious to me because I've done this literally thousands of times with women. Like, I can see it pretty clearly, but I want my client to see it too. Like, I want them to look at their day, be like, oh yeah, like I'm not doing these things. And I'm, first of all, maybe you never heard these things before. Like, if what I just told you, if you're like, I don't even know what he's talking about, like, that's fine. But like, if you're hearing it, you're like, oh man, like, that's how my labs look or whatever. Like, that's what I sound like. And I have low energy, and, I'm not absorbing nutrients. I'm not breaking them down. So I could be eating a good diet, but I'm not breaking it down. Like, that's a functional medicine perspective, right? Like, if you have that kind of root cause outlook on life, you'll start diving in deep enough to figure out how these things all tie together and how they make sense. But you don't need to go do a bunch of crazy expensive labs off the bat. Like, I mean, I'm not opposed to that. Like, I've done a lot of mold tests and heavy metal tests and environmental toxins and Dutch tests and all these different things with people. But, it's not always necessary, especially initially, if you're not doing the foundational things first and you're not figuring out like what these basic requirements of life are. And I always tell people, and this is not to be offensive, and you've probably heard me say this before, but you're not that special, which is really good news, because if you were that special, that would be a super unique case. And it means that you're really hard to fix. But if you're not very special and everyone has certain physiological requirements that need to be met, then we know like where the starting point is. And like, that's good news, because we can start to predictably get you on a path that will start to solve problems. And for a lot of people, once you get down that path, then you can start to ask the question of like, okay, I've done the foundations. My day is pretty consistent. I've set up a healing environment. I'm not just doing healthy things. Like, I'm actually on a specific healing path. And there's a big difference between healing and being healthy. And so once people are on a, like, just like if you break your wrist, like if you put a cast on it, because your doctor says put a cast on it for 8 weeks, but you're like, oh, I'm gonna take the cast off for the weekend and go play basketball. Like, you're not gonna heal, right? Like, you're gonna see like, oh man, why is it taking me months for my wrist to heal? It's supposed to heal in 8 weeks. It's like, well, you're not following a healing protocol. Like, you're maybe doing in general healthy things, like, oh, I'm eating my green smoothie or whatever and taking my cast off. Like, you're missing something here. It's like there needs to be a foundational understanding of like what your responsibilities are when you're on this healing journey. And it involves eating the healthy food, cutting out inflammation, making sure you're meeting your nutrient deficiencies with vitamin D, omega-3s, B vitamins, magnesium. Like, those are the foundational things that I think most people need, because we don't get it through our food. you have to be having good circadian rhythm. Like if you're not having a consistent bedtime and you're on your phone or watching Netflix or reading a book in bed or having stressful conversations before you're trying to fall asleep, and then you lay in bed for a while, can't fall asleep, and then you have broken sleep throughout the night, wake up tired, you slam a bunch of caffeine, you don't have a good breakfast, you have maybe like a protein bar or like a protein shake, and then you go off to your work, you have a salad for lunch, and then you come home and you're starving, rightfully so, because you haven't fed yourself, and then you eat a big meal right before bed, and then you don't sleep well because of that. Like it just creates a very vicious cycle, right? And so that's what people need to start kind of taking control of first before they ever get down this road of like doing expensive lab tests and expecting my conventional doctor to tell me what's wrong. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And I think women like me, like you described my life, going through the transitions, like I am probably I don't want to say ideal client, but like I'm probably the client that you see the most, like mom of 3 kids, going to all of their running carpool, running them all over the place, running a business. My husband works a lot, and it's like I'm doing the healthy things, but the hustle culture that we live in can be, even if you have some of the foundations or most of the foundations, it can come back and bite you. And I've seen that in my own life. Like I remember a time, and like we're an athletic family, we love athletics, but I honestly, like I remember one year when both my boys were in travel baseball over the summer, and Wisconsin summers are short. Like we have to take advantage of. It's like we have 3 months and we have to
go hard.
But I remember like a summer where both of them were in travel baseball. I mean, they had 12 tournaments between the two of them, and my husband and I were split. Our daughter was split. Like it was looking back, it was crazy. And at the time, we thought it was fun, but like my mindset is so much different now. And now I can look at what I was idolizing. I was idolizing my children and their sports, and like I was just, it was almost like selfish, like I was idolizing work and I wasn't putting God first. And it got me to the point where I was just in fight or flight all the time. And on the side, I looked healthy, and people are, oh, like there can't be anything wrong with her, but internally you're a mess. And like my circadian rhythm wasn't as dialed as it is now. Like you just mentioned circadian health, and I'm a huge proponent of that now because it's something that is lost in our space with a lot of practitioners. I think it's coming to light more and more because we know the importance of it. And, like don't go out in the sun and all of these horrible messages that we've been given. And then you put us in the women are in the hustle culture. And this kind of leads into my next question of, why are women more likely to get sick? I mean, we have fluctuating hormones that are allowed kid, but I just feel like, and of course now it's like I'm almost 50 years old and all of this, like I can acknowledge it now, but when I was in the thick of it, I didn't see it. And but I think the next generation will see it, but or more so than women my age do. But I didn't see anything wrong with that lifestyle until it came to bite me in the butt. But like culturally, we've been told, like if we go back to Genesis, we're created to be servants to the man, right? Like, but culturally, we've gotten so far off of that. So let's talk a little bit about that, like why women are more likely to get chronic illness and autoimmune illness, and just even if they're externally looking healthy, like they are just falling apart on the inside. And like just how it's all come to a head. Like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it is it gets back to a spiritual problem for sure. You think about how, as you alluded to, how we're created, and that, we're created differently. Praise God. Like that's a good thing. Like we're all a bunch of men or a bunch of females, like our culture would not exist. Right. And so like there's an obvious need for difference, but with that need, as women being the spiritual helpmeet to a man who is his spiritual head or responsible party. I always tell my wife, we were just about this on the way home from Colorado the other day, like we were chatting about it, and it's just like, look, like the way I look at this is I act as like the pastor of this family. Like I act as like the responsible head of our family. So like if our kids are falling astray or they don't know the Lord, or like you're suffering and you're not growing and you're not helping me to grow at the same time, because like we both help each other. Like it doesn't mean that you're incapable or that you're incompetent. Like if anything, I think God created a high level of competence in women to be an effective helpmeet to their spouse. Um, but it's a biblical model, you know. And so I think hormonally, when you think about this, um, you know, we men have like a 24-hour hormonal cycle, right? Like it's very consistent. Like it's based on the sun, it's based on our day to day. You know, women have that same influence from the circadian rhythm with the sun as men do, but they're fluctuating on a 28-day cycle, and it rapidly changes, you know, every 7 days or so. And so it's more of a consistent or more of an inconsistent hormonal level, because if you don't have that, you can't have a baby, right? And so in order to get pregnant and conceive, you have to have that fluctuation of the rise and fall of progesterone and estrogen and testosterone and all these different hormones that allow this to happen. And as a result of that, you know, like there's just a consequence to your stability. And the beautiful thing in this, in my opinion, is that, you know, you have the opportunity to help create life, which is such a, I mean, I don't have that opportunity. Like I play a small role in that, but I'm not growing a human in my body. Like I don't get to experience that. And some women would be like, wow, you're blessed. And other people would be like, no, like you get what I'm saying? Like there's a huge blessing there that I miss out on, that my wife gets to experience. And she has a close knit connection with our kids. And like, you know, the fingerprints on their hands are partially formed from like the inside of her placenta. Like it's like, you know, it's like a crazy thing to think about. Like she's like literally helping them to become who they are, and they view themselves, like the baby and the mother view themselves as one. And so like I don't have that. Like I look at, I was telling my wife when, you know, we had our last baby, our fourth child, you know, I was like, she just has like this, she looks at them differently than I look at the kids. Like, but I was like, you know, like that's how I look at her. Is I look at her as like, I'm like, I got to protect you and I got to like keep you safe, and I want to like shield you and do whatever I can for you. And she looks at the kids that way. And so like it has like this natural kind of like cascade of events that happens. Like, and so I think God has put me in charge of my family, and I'm responsible for what happens to them. It's not that I get to rule over them or, you know, use them as my slaves or anything like that. Like if anything, it's the opposite. Like I'm a servant leader to them. And my wife, you know, because she is taking on this bigger role of making humans and making a baby, her hormones are different and they fluctuate. And so there's just much more at risk for them. And as you get older and you start to transition into perimenopause and into menopause, like you're losing that ability. But the nice thing is, in a way, is like your hormones become more stable, right? Like you have less fluctuations of that. And so that's kind of like the transition that happens, is like you get out of this ability to make humans, but now you have more stability with your hormones. However, the big issue that I've seen with a lot of menopausal and perimenopausal women is because your transition to menopause requires that you no longer make progesterone in your ovaries. Now you're way more susceptible to stress because your adrenal glands are the primary source of progesterone for your body now. And so if your adrenal glands are also pumping out a bunch of cortisol, because that's where your stress hormones coming from, you're going to feel the effects of stress much faster. And so I don't know, you know, biblically, I think it's a good setup. Obviously, God knows what he's doing, and I'm going to trust in that more than I trust my own knowledge and understanding of the world. But I also can kind of see the why it's set up this way, and I think it's for good reason. But the crazy thing that I've seen is that when women take on, whether they choose to or not, more responsibility that is supposed to be for the man in that relationship, what do you start to see happen? You usually start seeing things like PCOS or endometriosis or infertility, and you start seeing more male characteristics come out, because I think that's, again, by design. Like if you didn't have a man in your life to help support you and you had to do it yourself, and a lot of women, this is the case, which is just, it tears me apart when I think about it, because like they are now having to adapt hormonally to make it work. And it's not great, but it allows for survival and allows for these things, you know, to kind of continue on. But I don't think it's by God's design at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. I've never thought of it that way, with the PCOS and the androgens and the male hormones being higher levels. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought of that. We've gone through PCOS with my daughter, and her cortisol was the main issue, and it all happened when she left home and went to
Yeah,
college.
it's
And
hard.
circadian health was completely dismantled, and she's in a dorm and
Right.
horrible lighting all day and not eating what she normally does, and
Right.
city water. I mean, everything
Yeah.
changed. And she lost her period for 6 months, and I didn't know. And she told me, I was like, oh my, like, this is a bit, and I think young girls sometimes they're like, oh, it's cool not to have a period. Like, I don't have to
Sure.
deal
It's
with
easy. Yeah.
that. It's
Right.
easier until like my daughter developed acne and just
Mm.
hair started falling out because of her cortisol was so high, her androgens were high. So I mean, we've been working on that for a long time, and
Yeah.
circadian has played a big role. Gut health has played a big role, but yeah, she has to be very careful. Like if she veers
Hmm.
and starts to stay up late and doesn't get her sleep, and and I think like now that she's married and has more security, just like you said, like she feels taken care of and loved, and
Right.
she's on a more predictable schedule. They're both
Mm.
teachers. Like things changed so dramatically,
Yeah.
and there's just so much to be said about both circadian health and just looking at male versus female in a biblical perspective. And we've been led away from that, and women can do everything men do, and we're
Right.
the same, we just have different like no, like it's
No.
you actually look at how we're set up from creation. I know my perspective changed because when I was graduated from college, my husband and I got married, had children, and he's like, you don't have to go back to work. You can, I'd love for you to stay home and
Hmm.
go to college just to like stay home. Like I did
Sure.
stay home for like 5 years, but then I got the itch to like go back to work and work
Yeah.
part-time. Then you're not good at anything because you're all over the place. And
Yeah.
it's just, again, like I realized these things pretty late. I was like, what,
Hey, at least you realize them. Yeah.
yes,
A lot of people
yeah, I
don't.
realize them now, but it is really interesting. That's an
Yeah.
interesting perspective
Well,
to
I just think it can be done. Like again, I want my wife to have skill sets in multiple things. Like, I want her to feel like she's competent, and she is. She's so competent in a lot of things. But I think it's just like it's creating some balance. It's just understanding that you can't do it all,
yeah,
right? And so if you can't do it all, like we got to pick some lanes for each of us to stay in. And so it's like if you have the financial means and your wife doesn't want to stay home with the kids, then it's like for me and for us, at least for my wife and I, like in educating our children is most important. Like we want to educate them and not make like we don't want them to become indoctrinated by anybody. Like we want them to be like we want to raise them the way that we feel God has called us to raise them, right? And so that's most important to us. But if we weren't going to do that, then our next step would be okay, like well if they can go to a classical Christian academy or some kind of like really good education system, like it's going to cost money. So like if we have the funds to do that, then we can do that, and then we'll prioritize our time differently, like when they come home, right? Like when they're coming home from education. So maybe anyway, like, there's a lot of ways you can do it. It doesn't have to be just like your wife has to stay home. But I think whatever you're doing, it's like somebody asked me one time on this documentary about women's health. Like they're like, well, what about single mothers? And I was just like, I don't have a good answer for that because like that's not God's design. Like it's going to be a really rough road if a woman is trying to do it all, and if a man's trying to do it all too. Like men aren't cut out for that either. Like, it's just not. It's not God's design. So like I don't know what else to say besides that. But sometimes we just have to kind of face the facts and realize like it's just not God's design.
exactly.
Yeah.
I would love to ask you before we close out here about hormone replenishment therapy and HRT, because I've had a lot of conversations with different people about that. But what I wanted to ask you, because you work more in functional and foundational health, and I'm getting to this point. So I still have a very regular cycle. I'm 49, but I know it's so only a matter of time before my
Mm-hmm.
start to decline. It's probably sooner than later, but I've
Sure.
heard different things. It's like hormone replenishment therapy wasn't always available. You kind of have the quantum biology, circadian type crowd who says just, stay natural, don't put the replenishment into your body. And then you have others who are like, oh no, like it can protect bone health and brain health, and having those estrogen and having the progesterone and estrogen, or maybe testosterone replacement for sleeping. And so
Mm,
you kind of get a whole lot of different vibes, right? And
yeah.
my question is like, how do you know when it's maybe time to explore HRT versus some of these more foundational, like having a mess up gut, or your circadian rhythms off, or you can't detox, like you're recirculating estrogen,
Yeah.
nutrition. Like, is it a matter of testing? Is it a matter of feeling out the foundations, or how do we know when it's like, okay, we should explore that option versus not?
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know why you would ever bypass the foundations. Like, I think the problem is, at least what I run into is everyone I talk to. I'm not joking you. It's just kind of common. I just kind of chuckle every time I hear it because it's every time for the most part. But people say like, I'm pretty healthy. Like I eat pretty healthy is what they'll tell me. Or like I think people have this in their mind of like that they're doing a lot of the right things, and then I like walk them through like what they're doing versus what it actually should look like, and they're always just like, oh, that's not what I'm doing, and I'm like, I know, like,
Right.
and so I think you have to be very honest with yourself,
Yeah.
and not that you have to be perfect, like nobody's gonna be perfect, but you have to be very honest with yourself in evaluating your foundations. And before you ever go down the road of getting hormone replacement therapy, which is synthetic, by the way, it's not endogenous to your systems. Your body's not producing these same kind of hormones. These are synthetic hormones. Bioidentical, on the other hand, are, more closely related to your body's natural production, but it still has a consequence to it if you're getting too much or you're not converting it very well. And so you have to understand, like, okay, well, why would hormones not be produced?
Mhm.
Because if there's too much inflammation, there's too many deficiencies, there's too much stress, like your body does not prioritize thriving hormones. Like it doesn't. It prioritizes survival always first and foremost. Like if you don't prioritize survival, you're dead. So like it has to keep you alive first. If at a certain point you're relying on cortisol for too long, you become like the wired and tired kind of person. Like you're always racing mind, but you're not feeling rested. You're feeling tired. And then at some point, at least what I've seen is now all of a sudden you can't get off the couch one morning and you're like debilitated because you're so tapped. Like your body is so tapped out, because it's been on cortisol high for so long. And next thing you know, your body's like, hey, again, I'm trying to keep you alive. So this used to work for a little bit, relying on cortisol, a stress hormone. Now I don't trust you with it, and I'm gonna like put you in limp mode, like a transmission that is going bad in a car. Like you can drive it, but not over 20 miles an hour. Like that's what happens to the body. So it's not that your body is like broken. More times than not, it's not broken. It's just that it's so intelligently smart that it's realized that if you keep going like this, you will die. So it's gonna force you to take your foot off the pedal. And so you don't utilize cortisol the way you become like cortisol resistant, like you do insulin resistance. Same thing with diabetes. Like type 2 diabetes is not a disease. It's like it's your body's way of protecting you from yourself and from what you're doing and keeping you alive a little bit longer than you already are. And so your body does that with cortisol. And I think when people realize that, they can start to see like, oh, I'm like on this fight or flight all the time. Like, if I got to get out of this, how to get out of this? I got to eat an anti-inflammatory diet. I got to meet my nutrient deficiencies. I got to have good circadian rhythm. I got to have good deep breathing throughout the day. I got to like make sure I'm eating in a calm environment, having moments of gratitude, like all these things that God calls us to do and gives us the power of the Holy Spirit to do, by the way. Like as Christians, we have this like not natural, but we have this supernatural ability to be self-disciplined and self-controlled and be slow to anger and filled with joy, and all those are what it requires for us to be a healthy person. So I just think as Christians, if you are a Christian listening to this and you do believe in the power of the Holy Spirit, this may sound hokey pokey to some people, but trust me on this, it's legitimate. Like anyway, it's changed my life for the better. But the whole point is that all these are what it requires for us to be healthy. And if you're a woman who's considering hormone replacement therapy and you're not doing these things well, you're basically looking for a quick fix. Like you're looking for a pill for every ill. It's the same mentality as popping an ibuprofen or taking a statin drug or whatever else for your problems, and it doesn't solve really any problems. Now, if you're on bioidentical hormones and you've done all the foundational things and you're needing just a little bit to kind of raise levels to kind of optimize you, I think there's some place for that for some people, for some women. But I also still ask the question of like, well, we were created this way for a reason. So what's the reason for women to kind of transition out of this? And so I think there's like a little room for this, but I don't think this is, again, we can't rely on this as just like solving a problem, because it's just going to create more problems down the road. At least in my opinion, it will. So
Yeah, and that's where I'm more leaning toward, is just letting things go as God planned and not
yeah,
trying not to interfere with
yeah,
his plan and his design.
yeah,
For
yeah.
me,
And like, and lean into like the things, right? Like if you get that inclination, like, oh, I need to be doing this, like do those things first, and then like really evaluate if you still need to go further. But I sorry to cut you off there.
oh no, no, that's exactly the thoughts that I had. So,
Yeah.
so last question, and because I know I need to be mindful, you're a busy
Oh, you're
guy.
good.
So you recently turned 1 million followers on Instagram. I've followed you for a long time, love your content.
Thanks.
What do you think it is that, and I'm very respectful of the fact that you say this is God's platform. This is my platform. Like I'm here to pass along truths and knowledge and power.
Yeah.
But what do you think it is about your content that people are craving, that they're just like, this guy, like, like what is it? Like, why the boom? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know. I mean, I think, I don't know. I really don't know. I think, I've always just chalked it up to God's providence and just trying to honor that, like you were saying. I mean, obviously there's some strategy involved with what I'm doing, and I like to do the best I can with things that I'm doing. And so I think I've kind of, I probably do more than I realize to like pay attention to certain things, and like see what works and what doesn't work. Like I'm very analytical, and so I think there's always that piece. Like as a scientist, I'm not a scientist, but I kind of act like a scientist with it, and just kind of see like, well, this works, this doesn't work, and do more that works. But I also think, yeah, just like the content itself is worth sharing. It's worth knowing, and it's what people seem to want, and it's what I found to be actually helpful. And so like it's kind of like, I always kind of think like, well, what would I want to watch, and what would I want to learn
Yeah.
from this? And like I think I always start with that, and then I always think about like, well, how could I communicate this to like my parents or people that like, if I know it and I know it in a certain way, like how could I get them to understand it and know it so they can actually do something about it?
Mhm.
And that's kind of like, but it always gets back to like the why. It's like the why is that I want people to not be stuck in their current situation they're stuck in. Like I want them to get out of it. So how can I help them get out of it? Try to convey it in a way that makes sense, and not make it super heady, and make it very practical. So
Yeah.
I don't know, things like that has probably been helpful for people maybe.
Yeah, I agree. It's truthful, it's simple, it's honest, it's God's way. Like it's just it for me personally, it checks all the boxes. Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of content I want to look at and learn from.
Right.
I want clickbaity stuff. I want like actual applicable things. And
Yeah.
that I'm not, I might miss. Like I do a lot of reading and I'm exposed to a lot of wellness, but you miss some things. So
Yeah. Yeah, you
it's
got to hear it several times too. Like, I mean, I share a lot of the same things over and over again, because like I've had people that, have never heard, like I've posted it maybe 4 times and they're not hearing it until the fifth time that I
yeah.
posted it. And so it's like, I want people, there's like some core things that I found to be very, very effective. And I repeat share that stuff a lot, because it's so valuable. And, there's so much competing interest out there, so much competing information. It's just like, it's nonstop. And I'm thankful to get in when I got in, but it takes time. So anyone that's interested in sharing information, like just keep sharing the truth and make sure it's practical and make sure it's useful and provide that value. And like you've been doing on your channel too, it's the same thing. Like, people need to know this information. And it's as a person who cares, like it's hard not to want to figure it out. Like that's kind of how I think about it. It's worth figuring it out.
Hopefully we don't get taken down. So that's
Yeah, I
what
know.
I contend with. Okay.
I think if we did, we'd find a way around it. I'm not worried about it.
Yes.
Like I think we'd make it work.
Yes, because that happened to me a couple times already. And it is funny how things work out. But all right,
Yeah.
so somebody wants to work with you. I think your program is called the Active Life Program, if I'm not if
Yeah, it's currently, that's what it used to be called. I had an ebook that came out that was, I called it Holy Health, which is WHOLLY. It's just like whole, but holy. And then the website you can go to is that same thing. It's WHOLLY.health. And so you just type in holy.health and you should see my website. And you can schedule like a discovery call with me and my team, and we can figure out, if we'd be able to help you out, if we'd be a good fit for you guys. And, it's very practical. Again, people always ask, like, what does it look like? And it's about a 4 to 5 month process. We walk you through, a period of detox and meeting your nutritional deficiencies, providing you a meal plan, making sure that you're just getting those foundational things in place. And then, we have about a 95% success rate. And so we've been very blessed to see a lot of people healed and, getting back to their families and doing all the things that God's called them to do. And most of my clients are about, like 30 to 65 is kind of what I've usually seen. I've had clients as old as 83, and I have a client right now, she's 18. So like, but most of the clients are like 30 to 65 range. So yeah, that's kind of the details there.
All right. Well, you probably piqued the interest of a lot of women listening here. And I'm so thankful that we are able to have this conversation today. And
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That many women feel like they have somewhere to go and listen to. That's one of the big things. So thanks so much for coming on today.
And just one last thing, just to remind them, like, trust, like, your intuitive wisdom should kind of guide you a little bit on the stuff. Like, don't fall for the deception that's out there that there's nothing you can do about these things. Like, you can, like, most of this is going to fall back onto you and your consistency with following a plan. It's just that a lot of women don't know what plan to follow, and they get confused. And then they get, when you're confused and you don't have a conviction, you're going to do what's convenient. And that's what I think is the subtle trap that hits most of us, is that if we're not sure if we're even on the right path, we're just going to do what's the easiest path. And so we have to kind of understand what we're up against. But if we have a true conviction, we'll follow a plan, and like, we'll do it. Just like when if you're a mother and you were pregnant, like, if you were drinking before, you stopped drinking or you stopped smoking because you had a conviction that this was important and you needed to do this. If most women are so much more capable and stronger than they think. And this is why, if they have a conviction about the plan they're following, they will do it and they will see success and they'll do more of it. But you have to understand, like, there's a lack of conviction about what you're currently doing that's allowing you to perpetuate and continue this cycle you're potentially caught up in.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end. Thanks again for coming on today, Dr. Lake, and sharing all your knowledge with us.
Appreciate it.